Okay, we're going to get going here. Welcome to all of you, and thank you to Carolyn Crawford and the Pequot Library for hosting such an event. Just as a way of putting forth a little housekeeping, we will be recording this event for those that can't make it, and hopefully you'll be able to see it at some point. We are going to go through our presentation, and then we're going to open it up to questions at the end. You can either unmute your audio and ask a question, or you can write it on the texting feature below your screens. Love to hear any questions you might have. I know this is a big subject and a big topic, and we'd love to hear your thoughts one way or the other. Executive functioning is, particularly with kids with learning challenges, is very much a hot topic these days, made perhaps more challenging by this era of social distancing and remote learning. Personally, I have 3 boys, the middle of which was diagnosed with an auditory processing disorder at the age of probably 9. And all of them, not just him, all of them at various times have needed help with executive functioning. So this very much does hit home with me. My colleagues, we're all very much lucky to work for Daryl Capuano, who founded the Learning Consultants back in 2000, almost just over 20 years ago, up in Old Saybrook. We are a boutique, small tutoring company specializing in one-on-one, highly personalized tutoring. We do a full array of educational tutoring from elementary school through college, from subject-based tutoring to standardized test prep, college counseling, career counseling, to working with kids with learning differences to emotional challenges. Kathleen Brigham, who you'll hear from shortly, comes to us with a background in education. After graduating from Middlebury and Columbia Teachers College, she's worked in several schools, both in London and New York City, focusing on learning styles and differences. She has a concentration and expertise in reading, writing, and organization. She has 3 children, Eliza, Nate, and Zach, and who I've come to know fairly well over the last few years. Jean Card is with us as well, and she comes from background in therapy. She's been working with the Learning Consultants for 15 years, working with students with learning profiles, including work with the Grove School, Franklin Academy, the Williams School, Sacred Heart School, Mercy High School, and other public schools along the shoreline from Branford to Waterford. She's developed the Learning Consultants academic therapy program and has, like me, 3 sons, Andrew, Will, and Mike. And of course, there's me. I've spent the last 25 years, not the last 25 years, but 25 years immersed in the world of finance, co-founding an investment firm in 2000, all the while volunteering as a teacher, both in New York and in Connecticut on a variety of subjects. In 2015, I decided to focus on education full-time. I joined the Learning Consultants as a math, English, and economics tutor, as well as doing a bit of work in test prep, and became the director of Fairfield County. And it's ironic in that what brought me to the educational realm was my understanding that students need more personalized and emotional connection these days. I see a lack of engagement of students and teachers alike throughout the world of education, whether it be middle school, elementary school, or high school. Technology and social media, as useful as they can be, can lead to heightened stress, anxiety, and ultimately isolation. And what we have today is, of course, social distancing and self-imposed quarantine, which makes everything more challenging. So our focus with the Learning Consultants is to find educators or tutors who, of course, are masters of their fields of expertise, but most importantly, they're connectors, they're good communicators, they're motivators, they become mentors and confidants, not just academic tutors. And both Kathleen and Jean are examples of just those qualities, and no skill manifests that importance, I think, more than executive functioning. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Kathleen, and she can take it from here.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for that introduction, and I'm really happy to be here with everybody today. Steve's given you all our backgrounds. I'm just going to explain a little bit about our format. Jean and I have done this with different communities several times, never, always been live. So we have a presentation that we've done and worked with a lot of families, educating them about executive functioning. For Zoom, everything's a little bit different. So we wanted to make this a little bit more of a question and answer. So we put together the questions that we most often hear from families when they are calling with not always knowing what they're calling about, but usually ends up being something that stems from some difficulties with executive functioning. So we're going to go ahead and sort of, Jean and I will be going back and forth with our Q&A, and then Steve will come in at the end as he explained, and we'd love to hear from you and answer some very specific questions as well. So I want Jean to start and just give an overview of what exactly is executive functioning. What is this term that we hear so much about?
So, and good morning, everyone, and thanks, Steve and Kathleen. So I really want to keep it top line because I'm sure a lot of you have heard executive function. Some of you may have more knowledge or exposure than others. So in a really broad sense, executive function is going to cover planning, organizing, and the ability to monitor and manage. Planning would be organizing time, activities over time. So can a student plan and organize to get things done? Override, the ability of overriding immediate demands in order to accomplish a task. And last, monitor and manage emotions. So metaphorically, it's helpful to think of executive function like a conductor who's conducting the two parts of the symphony that are cognition and behavior. So if you can think of that as two cogs of the wheel of executive function, cognition and behavior that need to really orchestrate and work together in order for students to accomplish their tasks academically.
Great, thanks, Jane. Can you just go into that a little bit more and explain to everybody the difference between cognition and behavior?
Sure. So cognition would cover tasks like planning, working memory, and metacognition. So specifically, what does that look like at home? So planning would be how to use a planner, how to structure your time. Again, we're in the cog of cognition. Working memory would be how to study. What are the tools that I need to implement for me, for my working memory, to get terms down, data down? And the metacognition is a really important part because that's really thinking about thinking. So it's the ability for students to reflect on the planner they chose or the study habit they chose, why that's effective in working for that student. Now let's look at the cog of behavior, okay? Behavior is going to be emotions, attention, and execution. So emotions is that response inhibition. So if something interrupts the student, are they able to maintain emotional control? For attention, it's their ability to sustain attention over time. So at one point I'd asked a student how long he could focus, and he very candidly said 15 minutes. So again, we're in the cog of emotion. So their ability to, in behavior, their ability to manage their attention and sustain it for maybe longer than 15 minutes. And then last is execution. And there's a big one in there that's task initiation. So a lot of starting an actual assignment, studying for a test, the ability to get going on that behavior to task initiate. And then flexibility, that if you do start something and it's not completed, can you leave it and come back to it? So again, cognition and behavior are the two wheels of executive function that really work together. And if they're working well, the student will execute the academics at home better.
Great. Thank you, Jean.
Yeah. So for you and Steve, who are down in that area, Kathleen, I'm curious, when parents call you, now that we've kind of covered some of those touch points, what are the main issues of executive function that parents reference when they call the learning consultants for help?
Okay, it's a really good question. Very few people call and say, my child has weak executive functioning skills. Most people don't really understand what that is. But to touch first on what Jean talked about the metacognition, I think that's so important, because when parents call, what I always explain to them or ask about is obviously who is your child and what, and to get to the source of how well do they know themselves as a learner, because that, thinking about thinking is a really important part for the student. So we usually start with a conversation about, tell me about your student, your child, what is going on? And there's sort of three things that often come up. The first is, I don't know what's wrong with, and it is usually him. This tends to be more the boy in all of this, but certainly not just in that way, but to overgeneralize a little bit. he cannot get started. There are papers everywhere. He's grabbing a snack, he's asking questions, he's distracted, and I cannot get him to sit down and do his work. Once he does that, he doesn't seem to have any clue about how long things take, and it gets very frustrated and basically often gives up or hands in things that are very subpar. The other question I often get asked is, can you please help with my child? And this often falls into my daughter, but not always. She is working incredibly hard. She's up all the time. She's making lists. She's highlighting with different colors. She is going crazy with all of this organization and seems very, very diligent and organized, but things are not getting completed in a timely way. She's up late, she's getting stressed. There's a lot of anxiety involved. And all of these things don't really seem like executive functioning, but they all fall under some category of executive functioning, what Jean talked about. They're not able to initiate, to actually sit down and start the task, or they often are able to start the task and then get lost as they are doing it, or lose stamina or motivation. The third question I get a lot is an enormous amount of calls for writing. My child cannot write. I don't know what's going on with the school. They're not teaching. And a lot of questions about what happened to this writing process. And what I often explain to parents is the writing process is basically a complete mixture, or like a big soup of all executive functioning skills. You have to have the short-term memory in order to know what you're drawing from, to then come up with the ideas. Then you have to organize those ideas. Then you have to put those ideas on paper and then continue and write about them. So basically everything that executive functioning involves comes up in the writing process. So that's one of the biggest inquiries that I get, and we often fall back into the conversation of, look, this isn't just a writing process. This is about, we have to back in to see how your child is studying, is learning, what those executive functioning skills are, what are strong for them and what are weak for them. And then pick out those points that are weak and work on strengthening those. So those are the conversations that really occur. And like I said, it's very rarely, a parent who calls and says, I need executive functioning, coaching. So,
right.
Yeah.
I'm really thinking when you say that, Kathleen, you started off with the student who buzzes around the kitchen, pets the dog, has a snack, or the student who's up till all hours. And both of those seem to me where emotionally for the parent and the student is the biggest tax on them. It's sort of the kid who, it's like, what is he doing? He's not even trying. Or parents do call worried, like she's trying until 1 a.m. and it's not going well. And everyone feels defeated in that process. And one of the things that's been great for me in aligning with you, Kathleen, here at the Learning Consultants, is the way we work with students is such a consultative fashion, and deferring to the student as the expert, which you really addressed already. Students know what it's like and how and where executive function shows up for them. Again, not using that title, because I don't think students show up and say that either. Like, geez, I've really been having trouble with executive function in my academics. But they can really highlight where it shows up for them. And so things like planners, they've had ad nauseum number of planners shoved at them. They have been told 1,000,000 times to do flashcards. And despite having all these tools, it doesn't seem to be working, which again makes them feel deflated. And I think one of the things that you and I spend time doing, Kathleen, and Steve, probably you when you meet with your students as well around executive function, is really asking them what's working. And so one of the things I say to parents, and you're all on board and listening now, is do you use a paper planner, or do you use your phone, or do you use Google Cal? And the result usually when you and I have done this in presentations, Kathleen, is the answers vary. And the reason the answers vary is we pick a tool that works for us. And that hasn't necessarily been explored with these students yet. And so they keep trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Whether it's when they do their homework, like you were saying, maybe they do need to pet the dog and walk around the room for a little bit and then get started. Or maybe they do need a paper planner instead of an online platform. And when we work with a student as consultant, we've circled back to the metacognition aspect of executive function. And we're stimulating and bringing forth in the student the thinking about thinking of why is this working? Why would that be a platform that would work for you? And that's the way to best drive adoption. So if any parents listening have felt like, wait, we've tried these things, why doesn't it work? And to be honest, I use a paper planner, my husband uses his phone. If we had to switch for a month, it would be disastrous. It wouldn't work for me. It would not drive adoption in me to use my phone. So if you can think about that relative to your own student, that's what they need to unearth and find. And I think the last piece that's really big for me when I work with students, which may seem like a terrible business model, is my goal is to actually get fired by my students. I want to see these students be successful in incorporating these tools because they've used the metacognition to understand why they want to do something. They begin to execute it and they move on. I'm proud to say I have been fired many times. Again, seems like a frightening business model, but that's the end goal. And what's challenging is we meet students at different grades. I mean, Kathleen, do you feel like there's been an ideal grade where you've plugged in with a student to start working on these executive function issues? You know, as I say, I'm working to get fired. Is there a grade that makes sense to start?
Right. Well, first of all, couldn't agree with you more. One of the things I always say to families is I do not want to be at your dining room table for the next 5 years.
Right.
So look, ideally, we start the earlier the better. All right. It doesn't mean if you have a high school student you're listening right now that it's, just forget it. I'll get to that. But think about it this way. In elementary school, school is guiding them along, right? You get your assignments in smaller chunks pretty much every night. And then as you go through later in elementary school, you might have this is on a Monday and this is due on a Thursday. So the earlier we can get in and do that planning with them, the better. I think another thing to point about, schools and teachers are so well-intentioned. They have large groups. They cannot figure out every student and what method works for them. So they usually use a visual or some kind of planner that kind of fits the majority of the students. And that can be very challenging for students that it does not fit with. So as an example, planners are often given out in elementary school, very well-meaning. I have so many students who will never pull out that planner. It sits in their locker or their backpack all year long, and nothing frustrates parents more because that seems like the most basic thing. Get your planner out. So we'll even experiment with that. Okay, forget the planner. Let's go to Staples and pick one that you like. Let's use one sheet per day or one sheet per week. And building upon that, you give them some confidence because they have some choice in the matter about how they are participating in all this. So that's key no matter what age we're working with a student. But if we can work in the elementary ages, it definitely helps because we can build from there. We all know that habit forming is more difficult as we get older. If we don't start working out until we're 40, it's going to be a lot more difficult than if we did it as a teen. But what I would say is that most of the challenges that I see with executive functioning, where things really start to blow up, is middle school. Because now you've gone from a time where you're very looked after in elementary school. Like I said, assignments are almost on a daily basis, and teachers pretty much ask you or require you to take out your planner at the end of class or the end of the day. And all of a sudden you jump into middle school and it's independence. You're moving around every period instead of staying in a homeroom, which in itself is a planning nightmare. You are then responsible for getting your homework, for getting your assignments, and really for planning at home. No middle school teacher is saying, try this tonight and this tomorrow night and this the next night. So there's a huge jump there. And 6th grade seems to be a very delicate time for that. But there's also another transition that happens from middle school to high school. So now we've gone even more independent, and students really by then have their method that may or may not work. So it's harder to break that up, but it's certainly very, very possible. I see a lot of students at this point who are really deflated. So when I work with an older student, I challenge them. I say, listen, you've been doing your homework every day after school and it's not working because you are so distracted. So for 1 week, I want you to go home, have a snack, get on YouTube, take your break, whatever it is, and then start, and we'll make a plan. Start at 4:30, 5 o'clock, depending on their schedule. The point is it's very interactive, and they come back, and at first are a little bit shy about saying that it didn't work, but we build a good rapport. That didn't work. Okay, back to the drawing board. What is going to work? And that's, I think, one of the most important things that if I could sort of leave you with today is this idea that it has to be individual, it has to work with the student, and it has to be interactive between either the parent and the child, the tutor or the child, whoever's working there. And then lastly, I'm going to touch on college, because actually right now I'm working with a group of seniors in high school, and they're finished. And so why would we be working on executive functioning now? Well, the reason is now they're going to college, and hopefully they're going to college in the fall where they're going to be independent and not online and all of that. So we're now going to transition from a time where every moment of their day is accounted for. You wake up, you go to school, you go to class, you have your break afterwards and your sports, and all of a sudden it's this free form. You might have one class a day, you might have 2 classes a day, all this free time in between, which sounds fantastic. But again, if we haven't had strong executive functioning skills and strategies put in place, imagine what a disaster that can be. And we're all feeling that a little bit right now, because this online learning is more independent for a lot of students. So we're all getting a taste. I've got one in my house right now where, that freedom of, oh, I'll start my math now or later is really challenging. And that is what happens in college. So if you're sitting, and listening today and thinking, well, great, he's going off to a senior in high school or off to college. It's not too late. It can be more difficult, but we have an awful lot of college students who really struggle with executive functioning later on. So if we can figure out a system before they go off, that's incredibly helpful. So I hope that answers your question, Jean. But I think
yeah. And I think I read an article years ago about Andre Agassi, the pro tennis player, and he got a new trainer and asked Agassi about his regimen. And he said, among various things, that he also ran 3 to 5 miles a day. And the trainer said, why are you doing that? And he said, well, for fitness. And the trainer said, you sprint on a tennis court. You don't run at an even pace for 3 to 5 miles, which is really sort of akin to what you're saying, Kathleen, of picking out sort of what is going to work for you for how you want to be successful. And I think I really want parents listening to really be gentle on yourselves right now. At one point, as Steve and Kathleen and I are all referencing our students who are home, my sophomore in college is our youngest, and he got a little frazzled, and I had to remind him that I had also not been through a pandemic. So I did not have prior experience to draw upon of how he was going to learn and what it meant to, sort of shelter in place. And let's just be respectful of that. So just be gentle on yourself as you're watching probably your kids struggle with it and you struggle with it. Because, we're really not, unfortunately, we're not sure what the fall will bring. And so I don't know if you're thinking about that already, Kathleen, of what our students, both college level and K through 12, might be facing in the fall. And have you had parents asking about that? Are there things we should be thinking about relative to the fall? Which is a lot, because I know we're not even at June 18th or 17th or 19th yet, but just curious if you're thinking about that.
No, I think it's a really good question. And I'm spending a lot of time with parents on the phone, just sort of talking them through the different scenarios. And I think what we know is that we don't know at this point, right? But I think the fall is going to be some combination of online and in person, whether on a college campus or in high school. So we kind of have to prepare for everything. But with all of that is some sort of increased independence, which can be challenging for executive functioning. What I would say right now is that everybody's pretty tired. I mean, I'm amazed that we have who we have on the call today, and I'm really happy about that. I think from most parents' point of view, they're really burned out. We had this momentum in the beginning. We're all in this together. I can get my kids through. And now parents are burnt out, and the students that I work with on Zoom and different platforms are sort of just done. So I think we need to finish out this year and everybody take a break. and not panic and think about what I need to do, but to be a little bit thoughtful over the summer. If we have the summer that we think we have, kids are going to have a lot more time on their hands. A lot of camps and things like that won't be open. And that doesn't mean that we jump into tutor, but it is kind of a good reflective time to think about who your child is, what kind of learner there is. Jean and I both do a lot of intakes with students that gives them questionnaires to ask them such things, even simple things about when you do your homework, where you do your homework, in what order do you do your homework. For instance, do you do it hard to easy? Do you do it easy to hard? Do you like to do one chunk, like a task? Do you like to get that English out of the way and then move on to other things? And these are the kinds of conversations you can kind of think about and have over the summer. We have a lot of resources and a lot of things that I'm happy to guide parents to if they want to read more about that. But I think that's something to think about. In general, executive functioning is something that's really best done in real time while you're in school or while you're in a situation. It's not the easiest thing to sort of do in an abstract way, but as far as what we could do over the summer, you certainly can get to know what kind of learner you are and maybe identify some of those strengths and weaknesses so that when fall starts, then you can tackle some of those things. Now, when fall starts, we don't know what that, like I said, we don't know what that's going to be, but I have a lot of parents who are asking for that sort of structure to be up and running by the fall because they're very concerned about, what this is going to look like. But I think these are some of the conversations that I'm having with parents. There's a concern, but I also think a lot of us just need a timeout at this point.
Yeah, I think when you and I spoke the other day, Kathleen, I was saying, and it was for, we had done a Zoom relative to rising seniors and thoughts in terms of the college application process. And then I had a follow-up phone call with a mother afterwards. And she said, I have to be honest, I think I've just been living in denial of what it's going to mean and what it's going to look like. And she has other students, other kids who didn't experience the college process this way. So sorry if we're sort of shattering people's denial a little bit, but the academics will kind of roll on, and hopefully we've given you a paradigm to sort of think about your own student in terms of the cognition and the behavior. Where do you see sort of levels come up for your own child? Is it sustained attention? Is it emotion? Is it planning? Is it task initiation? So that you can just start to have some conceptualization of where you may see for your own particular child executive function challenges popping up. So.
Mm-hmm. And we're gonna hand it back to Steve and all that, but I just want to sort of piggyback on what Jean's saying is this idea of flexibility, I think, is really important, especially right now. But in looking at your child, if there's a lot of frustration that comes with students with executive functioning challenges. So if you can think of it in a more flexible way, the end goal, right, is to have them independent and completing their work and doing a decent job. But if you think about the way to get there being different for each one, I have 3 in my house. None of them learn the same way. None of them study the same way. And that, I think, is a really important thing for parents to understand so that they can be a little, like as Jean said, a little bit more gentle with themselves. And I'll just give one example of that, which is for all of us, especially with younger students, we want to see students complete their task. We want to check that box for ourselves as much as for our own children. And so it's very hard sometimes to say, okay, you're not going to start that assignment right away, or you're not going to do it in the way that I would organize it. And so I would just invite you to sort of step back and say, maybe there's a couple of options here and we're still going to get to that end result that we need, but it's just not quite in the way that I thought we were going to get there. And that's definitely challenging. I know from my own, like I said, my own 3 very different learners, but it's definitely taken some pressure off me as a parent and have me be able to engage with my own children and understand them as a learner and sort of who they are as a student. And that's been extremely, extremely helpful, and hopefully something you guys can think about as well. So, yeah. So Steve, that's sort of where we are. What do you want to take over?
Great. So, so what I'd like to do now is open it up to questions, and I can start this off by asking one myself. And one of the reasons why I think you two are so effective in what you do together is that you're approaching this important issue from two different perspectives, and it's hard to see the differences, but I've known you two for a bit of time, so I can see the different views and the different perspectives. But you're talking, as I mentioned before, you're talking about emotional health and academia, or education as we come to know it. And both are equally important. And what's interesting about executive functioning is that it sits right underneath that massive intersection of, kids aren't going to do well academically. They're not going to be engaged if they don't feel emotionally engaged. And both Kathleen, you and Jean do a nice job of addressing that issue. And I guess my question is a more general one. How do you make sure that the kids are engaged? And is executive functioning sort of the gateway to engagement? Because one of the first thing that falls apart when they're not engaged is the fact that organizational skills fall apart. And it seems like that's sort of the first building block that you can then build a program to improve an academic situation.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And for me, and Jean can answer this as well, but the engagement really starts with building a relationship first, having this trust between the students. And again, this depends a little bit on age, but even the younger ones, you can invite them in, right? And have them participate. I have a lot of students who have seen a lot of different tutors, and I think they're very used to being told what to do and how to do it. Yeah. So at first they're a little bit surprised of, what do you mean I get a say in what kind of planner I have, or when I'm going to do my homework, or where I'm going to do my homework? And that engagement really leads to, like Jean referred to, some collaboration. So I think that's a really important step. I always joke that we're sort of half teacher, tutor, and half therapist. You really get to know the student and who they are. But I think starting with that, I think the other thing that's really important for the younger students specifically, but it works for older, you have to dangle a little bit of a carrot. You have to get something completed. So again, that's why executive functioning is very hard to do in an abstract way. But if I say to a fourth grader, hey, listen, we're going to work on this paragraph together, and you're going to go home with either part of it written or an outline to get it completed, they start to relax a little bit and feel actually quite a bit of momentum, because they're like, wow, I can see something tangible that I can hang on to. Now, I will say as a caveat, we are not homework helpers. I'm not there to complete the homework. It's there to, as Jean said, give them a system and strategies to make them independent. But I think, Steve, this mix of sort of the emotional and the academic does come together in this way. So you do have to sort of be in both boats a little bit, right? You have to get to know them, build that trust, and then bring in the academics and sort of the outcome. And then it sort of becomes much more organic as how you go forward. But that's certainly how I begin with most students.
And I would say that just that applies to everything that I do as well. Whether you're talking about a higher level math class or economics or whatever it might be, that piece is part and parcel to everything that we do, in that sense, that even though when you're dealing directly with executive functioning, that is your goal. But in every situation, you have to have a bit of that happening at the same time to allow them to improve on a situation where they're needing improvement. So interesting. So you guys can, I'm going to open this up. It's again, I'd love to have it as free flowing as possible. You guys can unmute yourself if you know how to do that. I'm not the authority on Zoom by any stretch, but I'm assuming
we have one on, Steve, sorry to interrupt, but we do have one on the group chat.
I can read that. Okay. The question is, if we're looking at the same thing, I think, what is the best way to sort out which organization method really fits? Do you start with one and try it out? Do you try a little of everything, paper versus online, and see what sticks?
Jean, you want to answer that one?
Go for it.
So it is becoming less and less of a pop cultural reference, but I used to say to the kids, we would do a Vanna White, and they really have no idea who I'm talking about. I'm hoping all the parents do, or they'll really, really frighten me. But I think it is sort of like cooking pasta. You cook it until it sticks. And really, this sort of links to what Steve said earlier. I defer to the student as the expert. He or she knows how it feels. So we have a really intricate conversation about literally the physical layout of a planner, the physical size of a planner, if it's digital, do they want that to be like that? Do they want alerts? No alerts. So yes, it is a little bit of trial and error, but assume that you have information in your own child to help you get to some direction on it, right? That they will say, and I will open up planners. And Kathleen, I'm sure you've had the same experience where I'll open one up and a student will go, oh my gosh, no, I can't use that. And they have a sense of agency, even in elementary school. They know what will work, and you can help them articulate that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. So I have another one here. Let's see. We give our kids the tools, show them how to implement, and it works for about 2 minutes. Help. Planners, whiteboards, kitchen table, lots of doing, petting, snacks, sneaking in box, hug. So it's more of a commentary about the challenges that we have in front of us here. And it's true. I mean, I see it all the time with my own kids as well as my students. And I will say also, as you both have mentioned, that it runs the gamut in terms of ages. I mean, I have college students and even college graduates that suffer from some of these same issues. It is not easy.
So
I would say it's not easy. And I think our world, in terms of, as I mentioned before, technology, I think, as powerful as it all is, I think makes some of these things harder because it's a distraction from what we really need to do to organize ourselves.
Yes.
I'll just answer that a little bit more, Steve, if you don't mind, because I think it's such the call that I get with so many frustrated parents, and the most well-meaning. I have this beautiful whiteboard. I've done everything that they want. And I think back to what Jean was saying, if you just boil it down to this, right? Not getting everything, but just trying a couple of different things. So the planner's a really good example. When I'm organizing students as far as their writing, and this could be for a science lab, a social studies, an English essay, anything, that, as I said, a lot of executive functioning skills come out in that way. So if you think about it as giving them some say, a lot of times they have these great prompts, like put the thesis statement here, right? Or the topic sentence here. Well, that to me has already missed a whole step. That's similar to a planner. Here's your planner. That has missed an entire step. What is before that is what works for the child. So for writing, for instance, outlines don't always work, the ABC outline, but just putting those ideas on paper, a little brainstorming, putting some of the ideas of what you're going to write about in bullet points in 4 or 5 ways, 4 or 5 sentences before they start writing is extremely useful. But back to the planning, I think I mentioned before, you know, the idea of bringing out that planner at the end of every class or every day, we have to recognize our kids are in a tight schedule. And they have, you know, in my kids' school system, they've got 4 minutes to get to class. So if you think they're going to pull out that planner and nicely write down what they have next, it's not going to happen. And then you have the whole crew that's like, oh, it's on the Google, you know, whatever, Schoolology and all of that. I'll get to that later. And what I always try to explain to students is, it is a planner, meaning you are planning. I know you can go and find from a friend, from the internet, from your school pages, what your homework is, but we're using the planner to actually plan how and when you do your work. So it's a little bit of a different conversation than just a homework keeper. So again, just thinking about having some of those different conversations with your students, with your children, I think can be really helpful.
That's great. One other question. How do you get your child to come up with a realistic time for each assignment? My child tends to underestimate the time necessary, which can lead to emotional dysregulation.
Total meltdown. So Jean and I both use this method that's sort of, it's a good experiment, okay? Think about time. First of all, think about a couple different things, time versus task. So time, some students work better with timing. They can focus for maybe 20 minutes or 40 minutes, and you have to experiment a little bit of what that is. But I use timers with students. I'll say, okay, listen, you are gonna sit down and do this assignment for 20 minutes, and I wanna know exactly what you get accomplished.
That sounds like Wicked Witch of the West.
I know, it sounds
I'm teasing.
It does. But the thing that's kind of cool about it is that I want the reporting from them, and they're almost always surprised at how much they get done in that 20 or 40 minutes, because they have this idea in their head, English is going to take me 4 hours. It's not going to actually take you 4 hours.
Right.
So they have to get to know themselves and their own time management a little bit. But I have other students that if you think they're going to work for 40 minutes and then stop on that English essay, absolutely not. That would just completely freak them out. So that's what I would call a task person, meaning they need to get that English assignment done and then take a break. So that's one thing to think about, time versus task, which works better for your student. And those are things that you can experiment with. And I think Jean can speak to this next, maybe about how and when you do your homework, right?
Well, and I also wanted to say that, because I got a little bit excited when I saw the question, talk about geeking out on my job, but I think I'm doing that right now with a student who is exactly what this question was typed in, of like, my child has no idea how long an assignment will do. So she and I actually said we have the luxury, believe it or not, of distance learning right now, because she has a big whiteboard in her, and she's in high school. So let me be clear. She's a rising senior, so 11th into 12th grade. So just developmentally, you know where she's at. And I'm having her track that. I'm trying to tap into her metacognition, her thinking about thinking. How long did you think it was going to take? How long did it take you? Why did it take you that long? What happened? Well, this week they're planning on getting a puppy. So talk about off the rails. She could not focus anymore on how long assignments would take because she kept thinking about the puppy. But really, again, recruit your child to start to say, how long do you think it will take? And now Kathleen has said, so put on a timer for 40 minutes, see where you get. And then it's really that reflection. Why did it work? Why didn't it work? Start to engage them in the process of going, oh, again, for this student, part of what happened with one assignment, she read the assignment, started to go off in a direction that was not even what was asked. She took an hour and 15 minutes doing it. And I said, so we need to be really clear on what the assignment is before we start. Maybe we need to read that twice before we start, and that will save us time. Because she just went off to the races in the wrong direction. And then, Kathleen, I'm forgetting what else you said.
Well, we talk a lot about sort of what order or where you do your homework, and it seems like such a simple thing, but you know, both Jean and I have experimented with this, and you know, I have some students who can sit at the dining room table and not be distracted, and that's fine, and I have others that can be in their room and be completely distracted. So it's again back to what Jean's saying about the metacognition. Not only how long do things take me, but where am I focusing the best and how? I mean, I cannot believe that my senior in high school can listen to music and do work. And I had this argument for years with him until I finally figured he actually can do that. I can't listen to anything without being distracted. So it is a little bit of that. We keep saying it's experimentation, but it is trying to figure out like where they are going to focus the best. And I will say, and I say this to students all the time, there is no such thing as multitasking. So if you think you can have the YouTube video as you're working, that's all well and good, but understand it's going to take you at least 20 to 30 minutes longer to do your assignment. So I always
Are you claiming that students cannot make a TikTok video while doing math homework? Is this what you're alleging?
Absolutely. They argue with me all the time. I can have my friends in the chat box up above, and I'll just say that's fine. And I'm not about working more. I'm about working better. So for 2 days, can you try to turn off your alerts and try it my way? Or for younger students who are up in their room, okay, I'm going to have you actually sit in front of me and do your work so that we stay on focus. And the result is not to punish them and not to shame them in any way, but to show them, oh, that actually did work better. And the end result is I got it finished more quickly. And isn't that what we all want, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said when and where and sort of what you do when, is if in terms of time running out of a child working on something for too long or underestimating the time, if a student is putting off the assignment either because they don't like that task, they don't like to write essays, they prefer to do their math and chem and physics homework, or vice versa, if they put off what they don't like until the end of the night, it will probably amplify the lollygagging and the disengagement. And so do they, again, metacognition, do they need to look at getting the miserable thing done first? Starting to work on the rough draft, or starting the physics homework if that's what they don't like. If that's what they're trying to engage in at 9:15, 9:30, that might take a much longer time because they don't want to do it. Understandably. You know, I do not tutor econ like Steve. That is purposeful.
And I think sometimes you really have to let them stay up late, do that paper, not hand it in very well, and not visit with them at midnight about, do you see how bad and how long this is taking you? But later on, when the things are a little bit calmer, to say, can we go back to that for a minute? You don't want to stay up like that. Well, I don't want to argue with you with that. So can we try it a different way next time? And if it doesn't work and you still need to stay up, then, you know, let's talk about that. But, you know, try not to address it in the moment, but to kind of go back and visit and remind them, right? How did that feel for you to be up late? How did that feel for you to get up early and try to, you know, get through that assignment as quickly as you could before class? And just, they become more self-aware is really the goal, right? Yeah.
Great, perfect. I want to allow anyone to voice a question if they have them. I just don't want to override anyone that prefers that. So I'm going to give anyone a chance to ask any more questions if they have them. And it looks like they don't. So it sounds like we're all set. It's funny, Kathleen, just as a side, I have a son, and for both of our oldest boys share that tendency to listen to music as they do work, and it baffles me how they can do that, because I certainly cannot. But that is the mode that works well with him. I just one last comment about bursts of sort of concentrated effort versus sort of a different sort of task-oriented efforts. I do find for kids that I've worked with, as well as my own boys, they tend to work in bursts of like 20 minutes to 30 minutes, and then what I like to say is sort of then get up and do something else, but make sure that it's a pre-agreed upon by him time that he's giving himself to get up and move. But having a solid burst of 20 minutes and then giving a break, I think helps, at least with my kids.
I agree. Yeah. Hey, Steve, I'm just noticing one other on the chat, if we can maybe address it, because this is one of my favorites.
It would be great if you guys could split that, Steve, the math problems, and Kathleen, the writing. I think that would be critical.
I don't see it.
Great. How do you get a child to double check writing assignments or math problems before turning them in to catch sloppy errors? So Steve, I'm going to do the writing because I am not, like Jean, I'm not a math tutor. Okay. First of all, getting a child to not press turn it in or send the minute they put the last period on their paragraph is the first challenge. We're going to pause. We're going to wait. And I always say to students, we're not going to be here for 20 more minutes. We're going to be here for maybe 1 or 2. So having them wait and get into the habit of reading the assignment out loud, reading that sentence, paragraph, whatever it is out loud, because right away, you're going to catch your mistakes much more easily. Now, if they're hemming and hawing about that and they don't want to do it, I often read it out loud to the students. Okay, I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to read it verbatim. So when a word is missing or I pause and there's not a comma there, it's a great way to catch grammar mistakes and things like that. But more importantly, afterwards, I will read the question after I read their answer and say, do you think that answered everything in there? And they sometimes pause and say, well, I'm not sure about that. What I will say, backing into that, so that's at the end result, how you can help them get in the habit of just taking literally 4 to 5 minutes to read it out loud and check it. But what I would also suggest is the before part. If they can have the question in front of them, either if they're writing on a document or they're handwriting, take the prompt or take the question and put it right in front of them, so they're always looking back and remembering what they're supposed to be addressing so they don't get off on the tangent. Also, then it's all in front of them at the end and say, there's the question. Did you answer it? And can you read it through and check for your mistakes? So that's sort of a simple way to do it. What about math, Steve?
That's great. Math is not quite as, math is difficult because it's very much of a binary process. You're either right or you're wrong. There isn't a subjective quality like there is in writing and English. So it's not easy for math, because I know so many students rush through homework and problems. Even in tests, they will not check their work. And I think it's really important to go into and to establish a routine of making sure that they check their work. And that doesn't sound novel in any sense, but it really is important. So many kids, even though they may know that, They don't actually check the steps at each point to make sure that their steps are correct. And getting to the wrong answer doesn't become intuitive. It's not like you can identify if you have, 2 root 3. That doesn't necessarily look any better or worse. It's not intuitive when you look at the problem if that's right or wrong. So it's harder to identify when there's perhaps a problem. And the best that we can do in math is to make sure that there's a system for after doing a problem and before you move on to the next problem to make sure you review all your steps. One thing I will also say, which is so important in math, and for so many kids, particularly those that tend to be good in math or strong quantitatively, is to show your work and to write down every step that it takes, even if it becomes painfully obvious that they know what they're doing. If they don't write it down, they're not going to catch those errors. So if you're reviewing homework of your son or daughter, make sure if they're not showing work, and even if they're getting it right, make sure that they're showing every step and they're writing down every step. Because as we build on math, and it's a cumulative process, as you get to higher and more challenging math, those steps become even more important to make sure you're doing them right. So I think the process is important where you basically show your work and you show every step that's involved in solving a math problem. And if they do that, then it's easier to check for them, easier to check their work to make sure every step is done correctly. And then you can be more confident that the answer is right. But it's, again, admittedly, it's a harder thing to do in math because especially for those kids that tend to be more comfortable with math, they rush to an answer and move on. And they're like, how could I possibly be wrong when I know it? That's danger in the sense of not writing down the different steps, but it's reinforcing those steps is how I would.
And if I can just, Steve, if I can just add in one more thing overall, sometimes, we're sounding like this is so easy, just get them to do all this. I think we all recognize it's not, especially with a parent-child relationship, but sometimes they've got to, not necessarily fail, but not do well. So you may get that math test back or that English essay back and look at it and let them look at it with you and say, or ask them, how many were silly, sort of stupid, careless errors, right? Or how much was based on just not proofreading and it was because your grammar was incorrect and you made some spelling mistakes.
Right.
And trying to make it tangible to, it's not always about the grade, but just it is about the outcome, right? So if you can, sometimes you have to back into it that way because telling them in an abstract way when they're doing the assignment, a lot of them just roll their eyes and ignore all of us.
Yeah, that's a great point because that goes back to the metacognition piece that you and Jean talk about in the sense that if they recognize over time what their tendencies are, and they recognize that I tend to miss when I don't show my work or when I rush, over the course of time, when that's pointed out to them, they'll begin to work to remedy that, hopefully with some effort. But either way, that's a great piece. Yes, I think it's letting them recognize for themselves what they're doing.
And in deferring to the student as the expert, and Steve and Kathleen, you could answer, I'll say to the students, are you better at slowing down and taking your time to be meticulous, both in your writing and in your math, or are you better if you go back and read over your work and check over your work? And I confess, I needed to learn early on in my academic career, I need to slow down because when I check my work, I absolutely say 2 + 1 is 4. If I can't, I need to just be careful from the get-go and be meticulous. And again, students will tend to answer me immediately. Oh yeah, I'm not good at checking my work. Okay, then slow down. Pick another option, slow down. And be careful. And I've had students who absolutely say, no, I like to go back and check. Great, then let's encourage that more as the habit.
Yeah, I find that especially with writing. I have a lot of students who just need to get it up and out. It's not pretty, it's not beautiful, but just get it up and out and we'll go back and edit and change things later. But if they try to make that perfect sentence from the get-go, it just slows them down, frustrates them, and they end up not doing the assignment well.
Yes.
Definitely not limited to just writing. I think that's true with, I don't mean to sound like a different generation, although I am, but either way, I think there is a tendency to rush through things and to get it done. Everything's immediate. So I think the work that's involved in getting in accomplishing any task and the steps involved are important, and you can't, we have to try to instill a sense of purpose and a sense of routine and a sense of structure and how these things are done. No question.
So someone asked, do you have group classes? So I'm going to let you two zip codes down there answer that question.
I'll answer quickly, Kathleen, you can afterwards, but I will say that we do have group classes, although our groups are never large. When we do have group classes, they're always small. Again, as I've tried to emphasize, what we do and what the reason why I'm excited about working with both these two superstars here is that it's highly, highly individualized. We're not one that's going to put forth a class of 20 kids and just go through a routine, whether it be test prep or whether it be writing or whether it be math or whatever it might be. We do try to identify what exactly is going on with each individual student. That can be done in small group settings, but not certainly large ones. And so whatever we do, if there's a group of 3 or 4 students that want to go through AP history or go through test prep or go through whatever it might be, that we can do, but it has to be such that there is individual attention to each student. That's all that I will say to that, Kathleen.
Yeah.
Any
Totally.
thoughts?
Absolutely. No big, I mean, test prep classes, no bigger than 8. I mean, it's all of that. But it's interesting in the whole pandemic era, there's a lot of worry that the spring was not what we had all hoped. And there's a lot of lost skills, specifically in math and writing. So what I'm doing is actually we always have small classes. We do a lot of writing groups, and that seems to work really well in a small group. But for instance, this summer I have a group of 8th graders, 4 boys, who will be doing some English and grammar and writing work over the summer. I'm sure it was their idea. And there's some small groups like that, do some reading, reading clubs and things like that. But back to Steve's point, whatever it is, it's small. And the majority of what I do is actually created for parents. It's usually parent generated. I have a student, who is taking the AP. So she grabbed 3 of her friends and we created a group. Like I said, I do a lot of the writing groups, and those tend to be generated by a parent, and they want some of their kids' friends there to make it a little bit more friendly. Whereas the other test prep things are a little bit more formalized, but none of them would ever be over 8 students. It all has to be individualized. Yeah.
Great.
Great.
Anybody else? All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up unless you all have anything else to offer here. You've done a lot, and thank you both, Jean and Kathleen, for carving out the time. Caroline as well in the Pequot Library, thank you for giving us the forum to speak with you today on this important topic. If there are any lingering questions, you all hopefully have my contact information. You can reach out to either of us, and we'd love to hear from you either way. And good luck with everything, and anything. And we look forward to being in touch. Thank you guys so much.